Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. Let me get some light here. Kind of looking dark there. There we go. Today, start out. I hope all of you've had a good week and you've been doing well. I hope you've been blessed. I kind of want to do sort of a follow-on to a previous video about the little season, basically revisit the little season debate, because it is kind of a debate as to whether we're in the little season or not. Move this back just a little bit there. What does Scripture really indicate about it? Well, I've moved into Revelation in my daily reading. I usually try to read a couple chapters a day. I started at Genesis, and I've just been working my way, and now I'm in Revelation. And I think I'm on Revelation chapter 5 now, but I wanted to focus on Revelation chapter 1. And Yahushua is speaking to these churches. These are real churches that are in existence, that was established by Paul in the Near East. Philippi, Ephesus, Sardis, and others that he started, Thessalonica, different ones. Anyway, he's telling John to write these letters to these churches. Okay, and there's ones for each one of them. And if you listen to what he's saying, I mean, he's talking about the way he is talking. It's present tense. It's not future tense. It's present tense. Just like he was talking to his Talmudim, his disciples, in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, Luke 21. He is talking present tense. He's not talking about some time off in the distant future. Because if that's the case, here in Matthew 24, whenever they come out of the temple, they come out of the temple, and this is the last time that he ever went into the temple. He come out of it because he's basically, it's being left desolate. It says, and Yahushua went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Yahushua, this is Matthew chapter 24, starting at verse 1. And Yahushua said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And we know that happened in 70 A.D. Okay, so this is roughly around 30 to 33 A.D. when he's telling them this. Okay, so we're talking 36, 37 years to 40 years later this happened. So it happened in those people's lifetime. Because I would say that these disciples of his Talmudim, they were roughly his age. They were, in their 30s. So for the average man, if the average, the scripture says that our years are 70, 80 if by strength. Okay, so the average lifespan 70 years to 80 years. And it can be more, but I mean, my father's 93 years old, so, so you can live longer, but average 70 to 80 years. All right, and so he's telling them what's going to happen in their lifetime. not some future far off thousands of years. He's talking to them, because they want to know, when is this stuff going to happen? When is these buildings going to be thrown down? And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, verse 3, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that's kind of a mistranslation there. I think it should be the end of the age. Because it was the end of the Judaic system, the animal sacrifice. That religion is what they had made it into a religion. That ended in 70 AD. It was gone. In fact, the Hebrew nation of Israel was gone. That was the end of it, because they did not fulfill their mandate. In fact, they rejected the Messiah. They completely rejected him, and that's why their temple and their city was left unto them desolate. Their house was left unto them desolate. Okay, and Yahushua answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. And of course, this can be applicable to us as well. It can be dual prophecy. It can be for their time and also for, as a type of the latter days, the little season time. Because again, as I've talked about in previous videos, Hasatan uses the same tactics and stuff every time, because we fall for it every time. We're gullible, and he understands that, and so he uses the same. He don't have to change his methods. Because we kind of over and over again throughout man's history on here on this flat Earth, we keep doing the same things over and over again. We just repeat ourselves. And that's why I guess you have this old adage, those who do not learn from history are destined to repeat it. And because we don't learn from it. And that comes from the fact of historical skewing and distortion. Hasatan, one of the things he does is wants to alter history and change things, so that we don't really know a lot of times the facts about what was going on and what level of advancement they had reached and all that. So they hide that. And if you look at the Smithsonian and all these archaeological societies and associations and the paleontologists, all these people, the intellectuals, the experts, they do everything they can to cover up a lot of this stuff. Like Göbekli Tepe over there in Turkey, they have made it illegal to excavate any more of that site, and only 5% of it's been excavated. 5%. Then the Egyptian pyramid story, the Khufu 2500 in 2500 BC built these pyramids with copper tools using granite. And they cut granite and stuff with carbide and diamond coated bits and stuff, and on steel, hardened tool steel. So you're not going to be cutting granite with copper chisels. So no, that I believe that those structures and a lot of these big megalithic type structures we see were built before the flood, and they had reached a very high level of technological advancement and sophistication, because for one, they had the watchers teaching them. Okay, they were teaching them this stuff, this knowledge, this forbidden knowledge. When you read in the book of Enoch, he tells you what they were doing. He tells you the kind of stuff they were teaching mankind. They were teaching them how to find metals, how to mine metals, and how to refine metals into useful objects, weapons, and machines, and probably everything else. And not only they in the book of Yashar, they go even further to tell you that they were mixing humans and animals. They were making chimeras. They were doing all kinds of genetic manipulation and stuff. And then, so we see that these peaks, like then a peak in our technological achievement, then a drop off, the flood, a reset. Then you come to the Tower of Babel, another pinnacle of technological advancement, and then boom, a drop off, the confounding of the languages. And then you come down to Rome, and you see this pinnacle of development and achievement, and then boom, this reset, the millennial kingdom, the tribulation in the millennial kingdom. And then you have this period of time that they call it the Dark Ages, which is only fitting that Hasatan would call it the Dark Ages, because for him it was, because he was bound in chains of darkness. Okay, and so to him it was a dark age. But when he's released, he's going to try and construe that period of time as a dark age, and there's no record of it, nothing written down about it, nothing, we don't know what happened during that period, blah, blah, blah. It was superstition, and, they want to do everything they can to hide it. Then you add time. And this is something I just noticed. I really never thought about it, but I'd seen it on maps, when you have a flat map of the world, that along the center of it, you have all these continents laid out on there across that map, and across the very center of it is wasteland. I mean, it's deserts, and across that whole band. And I think that whole area through there was the area of Rome. I mean, they were across the world. And that at the tribulation and the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, that there was weapons being used that were weapons of mass destruction. That, contrary to the mainstream narrative about like the Sahara Desert and all over there in North Africa, in the Middle East, that 4,000 years ago, that was, 5,000 years ago, that was lush gardens, and it was just lush like the rest of Africa, and but there was a change in the weather patterns or something, and it caused it to become desert. No, I believe that it was still lush in the time of Yahushua. That whole area through there was the Fertile Crescent, and it had remained the Fertile Crescent up until that point. And then, as I mentioned before about volcanoes, there is no recording of a volcano erupting anywhere in the world prior to 69 AD. None. And you would think there would be if they had been going off before that. I believe all these volcanoes that we see right now, all over the world, the cones and all that stuff, dormant or even extinct or whatever, all were going off during that period of time. They were opened up and released onto the world. Because in Revelation, when you begin to read about all of these, the smoke coming up out of the earth and all that stuff, that's a volcano. That's volcanic. But that stuff was happening back then. And then you have the account of 536 AD, which was added. This stuff was all happening in the first century. But they stretched out and added 800 years or more between the first century and the 9th century. And they say that 536 was the worst year ever recorded. 18 months without sun. Well, isn't that what it talks about in Revelation? The sky being blackened out and the sun, not shining. That happened back then. Not in 536 AD. It happened in the first century, around 70 AD. Around that was the time of tribulation. And, and Christ is talking about, and we know from what Peter and Paul was talking about, like, what's his name, Simon Magus. And others, they were coming in the name of, they were saying that Yahushua was who he was the Christ. But they were deceivers. They were acknowledging who he was. And there was a lot of others too. It wasn't just them. And they were going all over the world. Paul and all them, they were traveling everywhere and spreading the gospel. And then they were delivering it to people, and those people were spreading it even further. It was everywhere. And and there's archaeological evidence and proof that they were Roman structures in China, still are. They just try to keep them hidden and out of the mainstream. They try to hide this stuff. And they have all these organizations, like the Smithsonian, that's their job. Is anytime something's discovered, they swoop in. Like the giant skeletons and all that stuff here in North America. And not only that, everywhere, like especially through the middle part of the United States, along the 38th parallel, there is military installations all through there. And on those military installations is structures that they don't want us to know about. You can build a military installation anywhere. Why do they build them right there? Because they want to hide these structures. They want to keep it from public view so that they can go into these structures, and they're all tied to underground tunnel systems. Even elaborate tunnel systems. Like there in Chicago, all these big cities have these elaborate tunnel systems under them. And they were already there. Chicago was originally on maps was called Chalaga. It was already there. And the vision of George Washington, when this entity, this green-colored Native American, wearing Native American garb, showed him a map of the United States, how could they show him a map of the United States the way it really was, and then show them where all these cities are? They were already here. So they just founded these cities. They already existed. And so so where he's talking about here, he says that that they shall, that his it says, and you shall hear wars and rumors of wars. Well, they were. There was constant threat of war with the Romans. And ultimately, they were surrounded by the armies of the Romans. And the Roman armies were not just Roman people, the people of Rome. They were from all over the world. They were Arabs. They were Germanic peoples. They were all kinds of peoples that made up the armies of Rome. The whole world. Chinese, the Indians, you name it. They were all in it. And they all gathered over there. And now they're finding, and of course they actually disclosed this, they found these great big cylinders that look like cannons, but they're not cannons. They were some kind of weapon. Some kind of energy weapons or something that the Romans had. And so, they were more advanced than what we've been led to believe. They were widespread. They were all over the world. And they also had a marking system that they marked people. And you could not buy or sell if you didn't have it. And so, this is stuff that's come to light that they've tried to keep hidden, that they've tried to keep buried. And they get all these archaeologists and, geologists and different ones, and chronologists, people who study time periods and stuff like that. They're all in league together. They are told, if you want tenure at this university, if you want to get the accolades, if you want to get the recognition, you keep your mouth shut about these discoveries, and you keep maintaining the official narrative. And one of the things that they do is they go to these locations when they're discovered, they secure them, they seize any kind of technology or anything that they find there. Because what happened is one of the things is, as I've talked about before, I mean, there may be technologies that you don't realize that it is a technology. Because it operates totally different from anything that we are familiar with. Using using acoustics, using the energy that is surrounding us. We're surrounded by energy. So, and see, that's why they had to shut Tesla down. He was reverse engineering this wireless electricity. It was already here. It already existed. And he was reverse engineering this stuff. He was smart. He didn't develop this stuff on his own. It was already here, and he was just reverse engineering it. He was smart enough to do that. Because if you look, it's funny, you have all these streetcars. They were in all these cities all over the place, and they were electric. But then all of a sudden, they're being horse-drawn. Why? How do you go from electric streetcars to horse-drawn streetcars? Because they started breaking down and they didn't know how to fix them. They didn't know how to repair these things. So they would have to start just drawing them around with horses. Same with trains. They found trains. There was 250,000 miles of train tracks all over the United States. The Transcontinental Railroad, they didn't build it. They dug it up. It was buried. They found, they would find a structure out somewhere, out on a prairie or whatever, and they was like, why is this building out here? And then they'd see just a little bit of railroad track there or something, and so they would start digging it up. There's photographs of them digging up railroads, like over in France, in Paris. I mean, you can see, these railroad tracks are 5-6 feet down below grade, and there's heaping piles of dirt along that railroad where they're digging it up. They were already here. Same thing with airships. These buildings like the Empire State Building got the spire on it sticking up on it. That was so these airships could come up there and recharge using the wireless electricity, inductive charging. And so all this stuff is you've had these peaks, and we're in one of these elevations of technology and knowledge right now. And then of course it's going to be like all the other ones. It's going to go, there's going to be a reset. Of course, this time, this is when we come to the end of this saga. The saga of the fall of man and the redemption of man, and then the judgment of man. And so we're in this little last period here, this last little age and now we're in the revealing. Because people are going to have to be without excuse. When they go before judgment, they're going to be without excuse because things are being revealed, and if you refuse to acknowledge it and accept it, then you're going to be completely engulfed by the strong delusion and believe their lie. Heliocentric cosmology, evolution, and of course their false messiah. The Zionists over there in Israel, their false messiah. Because they hate the true Messiah. They hate him. They still openly say they hate him. And they openly admit that their Messiah is our Antichrist. And there's always Antichrist. Nimrod was an Antichrist. Nero was an Antichrist. And you're going to have, and before the flood, they was Lucifer. Because Hamashiach has always existed. I mean, so they've always hated him. So that so that tells you that you can have these. It's a cycle. It's just goes through cycles, and they repeat. It's repeating cycles. I mean, that's the thing that has kind of been borne out to me by repeatedly reading the scriptures. I began to see that it's patterns, repeating patterns, and that's how you can know and recognize things that are happening in our own time. I tell you the end from the beginning. The end is going to be just like the beginning was. During these other periods, Nimrod and the Roman period, they wasn't, as far as I know, they wasn't doing genetic, they hadn't reached that level of genetic manipulation and stuff, making chimeras. They may have been, I don't know, but I don't think they were. But we're repeating, and I believe that just like back then, the Watchers, were interacting with humans. I believe they are interacting with humans now, high-level humans. They've been interacting with them since Hasatan was released. And Hasatan, or the Satan, there's more than one Satan. There's 7 of them. There's Seraphim. One of them is the Satan, the one who led the sons of God astray. Okay? That's the one you see the statue of up here in New York Harbor on Liberty Island up there. The Statue of Liberty with the chain around its ankle that's broken. That is the Satan. Hasatan. Okay? And so that Hasatan, and of course these other ones, they're the ones that they have been deluding and leading man astray ever since the fall of Adam. And so they follow the same playbook. That's why you have this repeating cycle. They do the same thing every time because people forget. They forget what happened back then. It's so far distant from that it becomes a myth. And then Hasatan plays on that and emphasizes that it's a myth and publishes everything in the historical books and in the educational books. Mythology. This is Greek mythology. This is Hebrew mythology. This is Assyrian mythology. They relegate it all to mythology, so that you just say, oh well, that's just a myth. That didn't really happen. Somebody just made that up, and so you never really learn from it. So you end up repeating the same cycle over again. And that's why they have these organizations. The Catholic Church is notorious. They're notorious for swooping in and building, their churches or whatever on top of these ancient sites. Especially the ones that have the cave systems and stuff. Because they want to get control of this technology and of like the emerald tablets, the gold tablets, copper tablets, and stuff like that are semi-permanent. I mean, they are a permanent way just about to record something. They're very durable and can withstand long periods of time. They're non-reactive most of the time. Like gold and copper, they don't really react with anything else. Copper does oxidize, but as far as it's pretty pretty impervious to a lot of stuff. And the same with gold. Gold is it doesn't oxidize, but it's it's pretty impervious to most stuff. Now, granted, it can erode over time, but if you anneal it with an alloy or something, make an alloy out of it, you can make that stuff really durable and hard. And I'm sure they were teaching them how to do metallurgy and all. I'm sure they were capable of making alloys. And so again, we have this repeating theme here. And he says, you'll hear about wars and rumors of wars, and of course they did. I mean, they if you read some of the Wars of the Jews, or the Antiquity of the Jews by Josephus, he was in them wars and around that period of time. And about nation rising against nation and kingdom against, and of course there was a lot of that going on back then, and that was because Rome was subduing them. Rome was subduing all of these kingdoms. And of course pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places, and these earthquakes was causing these volcanoes. The earth was splitting open, and these volcanoes were coming up out of there, lava or whatever, splitting, coming up out of the ground, and all over the world. And probably Yellowstone, the caldera. And there's a caldera just as deadly, not quite as big, but right there in California. On the backside of I think it's on the backside. It's like in between, the Sierras have a couple different ranges to them, and down in between some of those peaks, there's a valley, and there's a big caldera down in there, and it's been subsiding, and because the caldera is like a crust formed on top of a big volcano. It's just a layer of crust on there, and when it starts subsiding, eventually it just breaks and falls into the caldera, into the lava pool. And when that happens, I mean, you can have gushers of lava come erupting out of there very fast. But anyway, and they were having, of course, pestilences and famines and all that kind of stuff. Naturally, if you are making it so people have a mark before they can buy and sell, and they know that this is, they've been told right here, they, these people that are going around preaching the gospel and all are telling them that this is coming. So these people refuse to take Rome's mark, and so there's famine. They're not able to get food. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And they, the Roman candles, where they take people and wrap them in linen and dip them in oil and light them on fire. I mean, Nero, that's what he did. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. Simon Magus, people like that, they were all over. Even again, now today, we're seeing the repeat of it. It's just a repeating pattern. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. They have been preaching it all over the world. Again, if you're telling these people here, and then they go out and start telling people, and then those people tell people, you get people moving further and further and further out teaching the gospel. It says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. They did. I mean, they're in the siege of Jerusalem. They were eating their own babies. And this gospel will be preached, and you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. And the holy place doesn't necessarily have to be the temple. If you go back and look, when Ezra and Nehemiah began to rebuild the temple, the first thing they did was cleanse. They cleansed the platform there where the temple had been, and they called it the holy place. So just the cleansing of it, using the red heifer and all that cleansed it. And then it became Kodesh. And so the holy place, after that building had been destroyed, they went up there on that platform there, the holy place. And I don't think it was up on that mountain over there in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, what they call the Temple Mount. Because if you listen to what the Bible says, it says that the temple was built in the city of David. The city of David is down below Temple Mount. It's down below there. And they found a place down there. It was a part of a temple complex that had an altar in it and had a blood drain in it. And there was water there. There had to be a source of water to wash away all that blood. And so they, and some of them believed that it was the temple that was of Melchizedek, where he was at, because Jerusalem was Salem, and Melchizedek was the king of Salem. And so it wasn't up on that Temple Mount. That's all, because what does it say right here? I tell you, there shall not be one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. But they go over and pray at that western wall over there, the stone walls. But if you look down there in the city of David down there, they ain't that structure that they found down there, they ain't a single stone standing nowhere. So that and that third temple they're trying to build over there, that's all Satan. That's satanic. They're trying to usher in the Lucifer, the Antichrist, the son of Satan. I mean, just go back to Genesis 3:15, and he makes it clear there. I'll put enmity between the woman and her seed, and the serpent and his seed. The Christ and the Antichrist. I mean, it's so clear now. And, as before, I was like Paul said, like looking through a colored glass, seeing in part. Now we're seeing the full picture. It's all being revealed. They can't hide it anymore, and that's why they're escalating their plans. And these people in Washington, Trump and them, they're in on it. It's not make America great again, it's make Israel great again. That's their big thing. And if you look at that whole thing, the Zionists, the Rothschilds and all them, the involved Balfour Declaration and all that, that ain't got nothing to do with the one who wrote this. Nothing. And of course he told them, and he said, when you see these things happen, flee. When you see these armies surrounding, and you see this abomination that causes desolation, that's because it says, that they will trample the city for 3.5 years, the Gentiles. Well, they went up there, and we're not up on that mount, but down there in the city of David, they went down there and they defiled that holy place, where the holy place was. And of course, that is, what they did, according to the record of people like Josephus, is they went up there and they set up a statue on that of Saturn or Zeus or somebody. And that was their official, the official, I think Saturn was the official god of the Roman Empire. And if you look at these images they show you of Saturn, the top part of Saturn, it's a hexagram, like that Star of David over there on the flag. Or to tell you something about them people. Oh, we can't say nothing about Israel, the Genesis chapter 12. I'll bless those who bless you and I'll curse those. Yeah. Abraham. It was talking about Abraham, not Israel. Abraham. He said he would bless those who blessed him, and he would curse those who cursed him. Talking about Abraham, not Israel. There was no Israel. But people read into it whatever they want it to say. They want it to fit their narrative, the dispensational. And that dispensationalism was created by the Zionists, the controllers, the same ones that Satan, when he was released, made a league with, the Ashkenazis. The synagogue of Satan, those who say they are Jews and they are not. Because there is no Jews anymore, there is no Hebrews anymore. That ended in 70 AD. The nation of Israel ended. That was it. And then it says, and woe unto them are with child, and them that give suck in those days, but pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Okay? And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. And, you know, and it was. I mean, you look at this destruction all throughout the center of the world, center of the flat earth. I mean, it's just deserts and destruction. Even in our own deserts here in out west, there is melted structures. Of course, they've been trying to keep it hidden, or you know, because it's so desolate out there, you know. But now with Google Earth, people are finding this stuff, and they're even going to them. I mean, there's one guy I seen on there. I mean, he finds these places, like he'll see some kind of cave, and these blocks, like, you know, carved blocks. They're not naturally occurring, because you won't find carved, you know, square rectangular blocks anywhere in nature. You won't. They are just random in nature. I mean, and they're usually all jagged or rounded, kind of round or oval, or just any kind of shape other than squares and blocks. And so they'll be looking down there and they'll see these, you know, structures there up on top of a mountain, out in the desert, you know, I mean, out in just a remote area. And so they will take and get the coordinates, and they will go to these places and find that there was people living there, that they, you know, and there were structures there that had been destroyed. And places that you can, when you really get to examining them, you find out that these were structures. They're melted buildings and structures. So, you know, but again, this is the revelation of truth. It's being revealed so that people will be without excuse. I mean, if you can't look at this and see that we've been lied to, that we've been deceived, that everything in the mainstream narrative is all a lie. That includes religion, especially religion. And so, you know, and so when I go back here to Revelation chapter 1, it says, the revelation of Yahushua HaMashiach, which Elohim gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. Shortly is present tense. That means now. Not 2,000 years from now, but right now. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John, who bare record of the word of Elohim and of the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach, and of all things that he saw. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. So John, when he's reading this is not far from the time of the tribulation. Because if you remember, he told John, or told Peter, says, what is it to you if he lives until I return? So he's still alive now? No. No. He was talking about in that period of time, in his lifetime. The other disciples were all martyred. John was not. So he did live to see the return of Yahushua. It says, John to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you and peace from him which is and which was and which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne, and from Yahushua HaMashiach, who is the faithful witness and the first begotten of the dead, and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood, and hath made us kings and priests unto Elohim and his Father. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him. And you notice all those who pierced him? Who pierced him? The Romans did. The centurion. Okay? They saw him return. They were alive. And not only that, but Caiaphas and Ananias, they were alive to see it. I think in Matthew 12, when they blasphemed, and he called them out, and he says, you will live to see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power. Because the sky opened up and they could see him up there, sitting on the throne with the Father in their lifetime. It's not like he's saying that they are going to be resurrected and see it. No. No. They're alive and they see it. And you know, I've read from Genesis to Revelation. I haven't never kept track of it, but I've read it a bunch. And this is all, I mean, my eyes have been opened. I'm seeing things that I just never picked up on it before. I never really got it. I mean, how, and they also, which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him, even so, amen. And in the flat earth is how, you know, if you got all this catastrophic stuff going on, man, I mean, even if they had electricity or if they had communication systems or whatever back then, that stuff would have been destroyed. How could the whole world see him? Because it's a flat earth. That's how. It ain't a globe. And it says, I'm the Alpha and Omega. And they were crawling into caves and down into the earth, you know, trying to hide from him. Hide us from the one who sits on the throne. I am the Alpha and the Omega, and the beginning and the ending, saith the Adon, which is and which was and which is to come, the Almighty. I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation. They were going through tribulation. And then you had great tribulation. That's when it really got bad. And in the kingdom and patience of Yahushua HaMashiach was in the isle that is called Patmos for the word of Elohim, because they had tried to kill John. They tried to boil him in oil, and they couldn't do it. You see, Yahushua wanted him alive at his return. And for the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach, I was in the spirit, or in the Ruach, on the Lord's day, and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet, saying, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. And if you go back into like Joel, you'll see the Lord's day. It's bad. It's bad. It ain't a great thing. What thou seest, write in a book, and send it unto the 7 churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, and unto Smyrna, and Pergamos, and Thyatira, and unto Sardis, and Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And one of the things he tells them now, and he is literally, he's writing this stuff down, and he is sending it to these real churches, these ecclesia that exist in Asia, that are really there, real churches, real, right then. He is sending this stuff to them because 5 out of the 7 have things that he has against them and that they need to correct. And he tells them if they don't, they're going into great tribulation. Now, he's not talking about 2,000 years later. He's talking about right then. Let's see if I can find it here right quick. Here it is. He's talking here to Thyatira. It says, and unto the angel, this is in verse 18 of Revelation chapter 2. And unto the angel of the church in Thyatira write, these things saith the Son of Elohim, who hath his eyes like unto a flame of fire, and his feet are like fine brass. I know thy works in charity, and service, and faith, and thy patience, and thy works, and the last to be more than the first. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication, and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. And I gave her space to repent in her fornication, and she repented not. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repent of their deeds. So he's talking about those churches right then, and those people in those churches right then, that they are going to go into great tribulation if they don't repent and get rid of this harlot, this Jezebel. Now, that should tell you something right there, that the ones who, when it got up to that point where the great tribulation, when it was really getting bad, his people that were faithful and obedient were taken out of it. They were removed out of it. That's why he's telling them, pray that ye be counted worthy to escape these things and to stand before the Son of Man. Because this is what was coming on. So, they were already in tribulation. At this period, that's what John was saying. He was in tribulation on the Isle of Patmos. And all the believers, they were being martyred everywhere. And isn't that what it says further on in Revelation? In chapter 5 about the souls of those who were slain for their, beheaded for their testimony. And that there was more to come. They were being beheaded. They were, anybody that refused to worship Saturn, the god of the Romans, the Antichrist, Lucifer, were beheaded or made into a Roman candle, rolled up in linen and dipped in oil and lit on fire, or boiled in oil like John was. But they were those who escaped all that. They suffered tribulation, because, you know, even now these people, these disciples say, oh, we're not going to go through the tribulation and all that stuff. Well, yeah, we're going to have a tribulation too. But this one is different. And this is where people make the mistake. Again, you got to go back to the beginning and understand what was happening back then. If you listen to what it says about Noah, it says Noah was perfect in his generations, in his genetics. He had not been genetically altered. Everybody else, you know, in Genesis 6, it looks at it, it says, and Yahweh looked down and he saw that the whole earth had been corrupted. It ain't just talking about sin. It's talking about they were altering everything, just like what we're seeing now. The altering of plants, the altering of insects, the altering of humans, the altering of animals, genetically. And it's the same thing. It's a repeat of the past. But you notice, it's only been recently that this stuff has come out, because they suppressed the book of Enoch and these other extra biblical texts that the scripture mentions. I mean, like they're in Joshua 10, you know, if you want to know, basically, you want to know more about the day the sun stood still, isn't it also written in the book of Yashar? So, you know, the book, the scriptures is sort of gives us a synopsis of events, of all the events. And then if you want to know more detail about those events, then you can go and look in these extra biblical books that it talks about. And that's why. Because if you know, the Bible would be, you know, 2 feet thick, if you're 3 feet thick, if you had all of these books included in it, you know. I mean, so you know, but these were all books that they were all familiar with. But in the modern era now, Hasatan, that's one of the things he had to try and suppress, was the extra biblical text that give you context, that gives you a lot more of the context and a lot more of the details of what happened. And, you know, they kept that suppressed, kept it hidden. But as time has gone on, people have, you know, stumbled on versions of it and stuff, and so, you know, and had to translate a lot of them sometimes. I mean, to find out. And of course, the Ethiopian Coptic Bible, or I think it's the Coptic Bible, or it's in Gaetz, and but it has all of them in there. And they had to translate it out of that language into English. And so the conclusion that I have is that we are in the little season. That the tribulation and the millennial kingdom and all that stuff, that's all in the past. That we are in one of these cycles where we're getting close to the top of it. And then, of course, once you get to the top, it's downhill from there. You know, you go. And what I believe is, and I've talked about this, is that they're trying to create people, that they want to create people that genetically, that can receive these Neuralink chips and then be connected to this AI system that they're building, this Stargate. And of course, I heard the person that's leading that is the guy that founded the open source Chat GPT, which is no longer open source anymore. And Sam Altman is the one spearheading that, leading it. But there's all of these companies are all involved in it. SoftBank, Microsoft, Palantir, Oracle, all of these companies, tech giants, are all, NVIDIA, they're all involved in it. And of course, again, I've talked about how, and even I've listened to some of these people. I kind of follow some of the stuff about this AI as it's progressing. And right now, the most powerful AI in the world is Grok 4. The Tesla AI Colossus is that, and they even talk about it, is that one of them is going to ultimately become so dominant that it'll take over all the other ones. And of course, I think that's where we're at that point now, where the systems are being developed, and massively scaled to come to this competition to see which one is going to be the dominant system that's going to take over all the other ones. Not just here, all over the world. And of course, despite what people, try to say, oh, China is catching up, but no, they're not. No, they're not. They just want people to be afraid, so that whenever they want more money to invest in this stuff, then people will be okay with it. They won't balk at it. Well, we got to, they're catching up. And the technology, the Chinese really don't invent anything, because you have to have freedom to be creative and inventive. They don't have freedom. They're under an authoritarian government that suppresses them, and suppresses, and tells them how to think. So they're just not really capable of inventing or creating anything. So they just steal technology and pilfer it wherever they can. And of course, we feed them technology and stuff that will kind of discourage them from trying to create their own stuff. We'll give them old stuff, old technology and stuff like that, and they always, if the media and all always propagates this threat narrative. Oh, we're losing the technology battle. They're talking about now, Japan just was able to produce the world's first 2-nanometer chip architecture without using ASML, extreme ultraviolet technology. Nikon built some type of a light source or whatever to print the circuit patterns onto the silicone through a mask at a 2-nanometer level without using, because ASML is a company over in the Netherlands. They're the only people, up until now, they were the only ones in the world that had machines capable of putting down these, at least what we're told. And so, it's now, the United States really doesn't care who has it, because we will control it. Just like Rome back then, controlled everything. The U.S. right now is the undisputed power. There's no doubt, there's no doubt about that. And only growing in power. And they, if the push to bring all this manufacturing back here is just, especially the chip making fabs and stuff like that. TSMC is making a fab plant out here in Arizona, I think, like $70 billion they're putting into this facility. Well, it's a duplicate of the one that they have over in Taiwan. You know, because TSMC is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They are the world's premier manufacturer of chips. But they don't design the chips. They don't design the masks. They just make the chips. And they're good at it. They're the best. Well, if China gets a hold of them, you know, and gets a hold of Taiwan and gets that, well, what are we going to do, you know, here in America? We rely on TSMC to produce the real high-end chips, like the NVIDIA CPU or GPUs and stuff, you know, that are being used in the AI and all that stuff. Well, I think one thing that would happen is China was really going to get a hold of Taiwan. They'd probably destroy that facility. You know, that main fab plant there. They'd probably destroy them so that China couldn't get a hold of it. And so, you know, that's why they're building a replica of that one here. And then Intel, they're building a huge fab up here in Ohio, but I heard the brakes have been put on it, and that Intel's they're in a bad way because they put all their eggs in one basket, and they were big-headed. They just believed they were invincible or whatever, and you know, their share price and all that stuff's gone plump, and then NVIDIA is now the most valuable company in the world because they're the ones, their technology, their hardware technology is driving this AI revolution. And so and they're way ahead of anybody else in producing these GPUs. And again, they just design them, they don't build them. They don't build, you know, TSMC builds the chips, the GPUs and stuff. And so, you know, you can see that we're and the talk is that we're going to start seeing revolutionary stuff. I mean, technology and stuff that's beyond, you know, because of this AI being able to work with engineers and to work with software architects and stuff and software engineers to develop programs very rapidly and, you know, more accurate, less bugs, you know, more stable, more secure. And so you're going to see a revolution in technological advancement. Of course, this is them releasing stuff that's already existed. There's nothing new under the sun. This is just they, you know, like they've always done. They slowly release this stuff out, and they have people to reverse engineer it and figure it out. You know, you get to a level where you're capable of reverse engineering it and producing it. You see, it's a set of stages or steps. I mean, in the time of Tesla, he could have understood it, but he couldn't have produced it. The level of technology that it takes to produce these chips and stuff just didn't exist. And the technology to build the systems to build the chips didn't exist. So, you know, you got to go through these stages of development, of developing the manufacturing technologies to get, you know, possibly you could have if they'd released it, you know, I mean, but again, I just don't think that people's level of knowledge and understanding would have been sufficient to, you might have built this facility, but you wouldn't have understood how to operate it, you know, how to make it work. I mean, that took years and years of them slowly releasing and leading you from one step to the next step, from the transistor, from the tube to the transistor to the the chip, and from the chip, to photonics. Now it's photonics integration, to go between processors and between chips and the peripheral chips and all that stuff on the board. So that's now we've pretty much got a grasp on all of these different technologies, and now they're all being integrated into one package that operates at extreme levels. And so that's the same level. And then of course their idea though is to build an army to go up against the camp of the saints in the new city, the holy city. And of course the people, they want the people who are willing to go along with it. Anybody that's not willing, and they're filling it out. They've been filling it out. They can look at a video like this here, and using AI, they can see, that they can, put a little X on your channel, behind the background there, on your, their information that they have on you, little X on there. Yeah, this is one of them people that kind of understands what's going on, and he's going to be trouble, he's going to be resistant, so he needs to be one of the ones to go. And not just me, but anybody that has this independent thinker that is not a part of the herd mentality, that feels like they got to do what everybody else is doing. Those are the ones that they're going to boom boom boom, it's going to start slapping, because they're going to be right there. Everybody else is doing it, and they're going to be just like it was when it come to the how they were just beating people up for not doing it. And so, everybody jumped on the bandwagon, and now they regret it. Well, it's going to be the same thing with that. Because as soon as they get that put in them, and they, and it's going to be bi-directional, they're going to get, this AI is going to swoop in and take control of them. I mean, and as once it's got you, there's nothing you can do about it. And it'll probably be set up in such a way that if you try to remove it, it'll kill you. Or if you try to interfere, shield it or something from the signals, the Wi-Fi, then it'll come after you. Either with a robot or and I mean, I was listening to Elon Musk, and what they're planning on, like with these Tesla robots, they're like Tesla 3.5 or something, Optimus robot 3.5. They're talking about making millions of these things, and they're developing the manufacturing capability to ramping it up to mass produce these things in the millions, and then they will be controlled by his AI, Grok. Because I mean, you can't put the processing and computing power that it would take for them to actually operate autonomously. We're just not to that point yet. But that's what their goal is, of course. But no, it will be actually connected to that AI, and it will be directing it and controlling it. And so we can see that it is sort of a repeat of what happened in the beginning. I mean, we don't know that they wasn't already autonomous, and because there is some records, historical records of robots, big ones, giant-sized robots and stuff. And I think that when you see stuff like Transformers and these movies and all, it's predictive programming. that they're programming people to accept that stuff when it happens. That, you know, the big transformers, I mean, these things are giants, you know, I mean, and they will be occupied by demonic entities, disembodied spirits. This will be their way of trying to interact with the real world again, other than just possessing a human. And so, you know, and that's probably the same kind of stuff that was going on back there before the flood. And we just haven't, if they have found that kind of stuff, they just suppress it and they keep it hidden. And anybody that happens to find something like that and starts to talk about it, you know, they just get rid of them. They eliminate them. But I just wanted to point out those things that he's talking about right then. He's not talking about, you know, and I've come to the conclusion that, again, this has been the big lie that Revelation was written in 90 AD or between 90 and 95 AD. It wasn't. It was written somewhere before 70 AD. Because if it hadn't been, there would have been something in there talking about the destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem. No, it's talking about there in Matthew about this is something coming. And in Revelation, it's talking about what's going to happen. And it's going to happen soon. And then the preceding books or chapters is telling you the things that are going to be happening during that period. And that would go along with what we see, like I said, on that flat map, that, you know, the whole center of the world is desertification, and I've talked about it before. Over there in Libya and Morocco and Egypt and all over in there, they find that vitrified glass all over the place. That's nuclear weapons. That's the only way you produce vitrified glass, is from a nuclear blast. Did they have nuclear weapons? Was Yahushua and them using nuclear weapons? Was Satan and his bunch using them? Maybe all of them? I don't know. But I know that they find this stuff all over the place in these areas that have, you know, that look like they have had some kind of a catastrophe. So there's my take on it. I mean, it just seems to me that it is saying that they experienced that those disciples, that John and other people that had been converted in that time, they were experiencing tribulation. And the ones who were non-believers or who had, you know, been told but just didn't want to accept it, they went through great tribulation. And then that was the end of that age. That age of, and a new age began, the millennial kingdom. And then that's where you get all of these great architectural structures that you see, like these big cathedrals and stuff all over the world, that were not cathedrals. They were not churches. They were places of healing and of generating power wirelessly, to supply power to these airships and these train systems and these electric boats and ships and stuff that were everywhere. And so it's funny, I mean, that all of this stuff is coming out now. I mean, all these different aspects of it is coming out. Even the secular people are coming out. You know, the people like Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch and others that are disputing the mainstream narrative about stuff like the pyramids and the Sphinx and different, you know, structures that they just, you know, the evidence does not match the narrative. Same thing with, you know, Gunnar Heinsohn and his chronology from the 1st to the 9th century, saying that, you know, that the evidence does not match the narrative. You know, the chronological timeline doesn't match the narrative. It's a shorter period of time. It's the 1st century, from the 1st to the 9th century, all that's the same period of time. It's not 9 centuries, it's the 1st century. And so you when you begin to see all, and this is coming from different places. It's not like one person has came up with this stuff and put it out there. No, it's disparate people, you know, not necessarily religious people, that have come to these conclusions and have put it out there. And some of them, you know, I mean, cease to live, you know, I mean, whether they was taken out or whatever, or just died naturally, I don't know. But it's just funny how all of this is all coming out at one time, you know, I mean, about, you know, the structures, you know, about the rail systems, about, you know, these cities, huge cities with hardly no people in them, the orphan trains, the asylums, I mean, all of this stuff that has been kept under, you know, kept suppressed and kept out of the history books and kept out of the mainstream. Seems like a big deception to me, don't it? You know, if he's released to go out once again and deceive the nations, I think that's what we can say rightfully has been happening. So, with that, I'm going to call it a wrap on this. It's just something to think about. You know, I'm not dogmatic. I'm not going to try to sit here and just, you know, convince you that this is just absolutely it. But it just seems to me, whenever you sum it all together, it makes sense. And you know, I try to be kind of logical about things, and I try to be a big picture person. I kind of am a big picture person. That's just the way my mind works. To take little pieces from here and there and try to put them together and see if they make a coherent picture. And that's what I've always done. And but at the time, sometimes, you know, you're just missing pieces. You know, you put it together with what you got and try to infer the rest. And sometimes it, you know, and that's when I began to question, like I say, going back 25, 30 years ago, about the Sabbath and about the holidays and stuff. I just began to, from what Scripture said and stuff like that, I just began to look at it and say, well, this don't really fit my mental picture. You know, when I began to put the pieces together, these pieces don't fit the narrative that I'd been taught. And so I began to have to come up with another picture, and began to put these new pieces in it to see if they fit. And then I've been adding pieces ever since. And so, and I get new insights or revelation or whatever as I go. I mean, I was deceived just like most of mankind. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been deceived. And I was deceived by the religious system, and I think most people are. That's why I've sworn off religion and the Protestants and the Catholics and the Buddhists and the Taoists, all of that. I just say that I am of the way, and this is the way. And even in this, you got to look at, like I said, about where it says the end of the world. Well, it ain't the end of it wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of their world. The Hebrews and the Jews, it was the end of their world as far as that goes. But no, it was the end of an age, the end of a way that was done away with, and a new way. And I just think that's, again, translational license that people take. They use a word, but it misconstrues things when you do that. Was it by design, or is it just a mistake? I don't know. But anyhow, I'm going to leave it there. Come to your own conclusions. Read this, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Revelation. See if you kind of pick up on the same thing. I mean, it's like there's an urgency, in what he's telling them. Like, this is something that's going to happen soon, not something off in the future, in your lifetime. And it did. And so, again, I'm going to wrap it there. I love you folks. I hope you all be blessed. And I will see you again on the next Shabbat, if Yahuwah is willing.